All right, good evening. Hi, everyone. My name's Allie Snell, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at Southern New Hampshire University. I want to thank you all coming for what is now the conclusion of our Business Indicator series for the year. And this is our Business Indicator series from Bedside to Boardroom, Leaders in Healthcare. I am so thrilled tonight to help co-present this amazing opportunity for all of you here, whether you're an alumnus, you're a current student, you're a friend of SNHU, faculty or staff, to have the chance to listen to these three remarkable women who have led incredible careers in the healthcare industry from a variety of perspectives, all of whom have very direct and distinct ties to this institution. So I will just introduce our moderator, who will do a fabulous job of introducing our speakers tonight. And again, if you do have any questions or want to think of questions for the Q&A session, we will have plenty of time to get to all of your questions. And I also want to give a special thank you to everybody who's tuning in live and who will be tuning into this recording later. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce Ms. Peggy Moriarty-Litz, who is our Chief Nursing Administrator and Dean of the School of Nursing and Healthcare Administration. Peggy joined SNHU in 2014, and in her previous role as the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Nursing Programs, Peggy demonstrated the ability to consistently produce highly effective results on several fronts, including the development of high-quality nursing programs, strong student and faculty success, support of programmatic accreditation and compliance efforts, and the development of a positive and fruitful relationship with internal and external stakeholders. Additionally, Peggy is a member of the Academic Policy Committee and has worked to achieve accreditation as a provider of continuing education for the professional development of her team. Peggy is an experienced nurse educator who has taught non-traditional students throughout several levels of academic preparation. She's achieved certification as a nurse educator from the National League for Nursing and is a member of Sigma Theta Tau International. Peggy completed the Edmund J. Safra Visiting Nurse Faculty Program at the Parkinson's Foundation. Her areas of interest are professional identity development for nursing students and expanding health education regarding Parkinson's disease. So join me in welcoming Peggy and our two distinguished panelists tonight for this event.
Thank you very much, Allie. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so then I'll get started. I'm very pleased to join you this evening and represent nursing for the beginning of Nurses Week and healthcare providers. And I'd like to introduce our first guest to my left, who is Dr. Maureen Banks. Maureen is the Chief Operating Officer of Spalding Rehab Hospital and the Spalding Rehab Network. She's also the president of Spalding Hospital Cambridge, Spalding Hospital Cape Cod, and the Spalding Skilled Nursing Facilities. She has an extensive and varied background in nursing and healthcare leadership throughout Massachusetts, Connecticut, Virginia, and New Hampshire. She's held senior administrative positions in academic medical centers, home care, and community hospitals. She's also held faculty appointments in both graduate and undergraduate programs. I'm really proud that Dr. Banks has recently received her Doctorate of Nursing Practice from the Mass General Hospital Institute for Health Professions, and she received her MBA and Advanced Certificate in Healthcare Administration from Southern New Hampshire University. Also, her undergraduate degree is from Boston College, and she holds a master's degree from the University of Connecticut. As a nurse, Ms. Banks' clinical focus has been oncology and hospice care. Maureen is a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executive and is recognized as a board-certified nurse administrator by ANCC. So welcome, Dr. Banks. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you. And flanking Dr. Banks is Beth Roberts. And Beth is here. She's the Senior Vice President of Commercial Business at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. She has overseen 4 commercial markets where Harvard Pilgrim offers insurance. She has over 30 years experience in the healthcare market and specializes in identifying synergies, establishing internal partnerships, leveraging talent, and leading a team of over 200 staff to identify the most promising opportunities within Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Maine. Previously, as a Senior Vice President for Regional Markets, Ms. Roberts has led market-based strategy for New England with the direct responsibility of her growth and growing New Hampshire. Under her leadership, Harvard Pilgrim became the second largest health plan in the state by entering new lines of business, forming unique partnerships, implementing a strategic approach to business development. Ms. Roberts serves as the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Riverwoods Group, is a board member of Benevera, if I'm saying that correctly. In addition, the New Hampshire Business Review recognized her as an outstanding woman in business in 2008. And in 2015, Business New Hampshire named her one of the top intriguing women of New Hampshire. So welcome. We're pleased to have you join us this evening.
Thank you.
So to start off our discussion, I'm going to ask both of our guests to tell us about your career journey and how you landed in your current role. Who would like to start?
Doctor.
Dr. Banks.
I grew up in the city of Boston, never wanting to be a nurse. But the year that I graduated from high school, up the street from where I lived, opened a nursing home. And they were paying like $4 an hour, which I had never heard of anyone making that kind of money. So I needed to do that job to get money to go to college. And I had been accepted to Providence College as a political science major in the first class that they ever allowed girls in.
Wow.
And about 2 weeks after I started working as a CNA, I knew that I had made a mistake, that I was supposed to be a nurse, and had a full scholarship, had to go home and tell my parents, sobbing. I couldn't go to college, that I had to become a nurse, which led me to live at home and walk to nursing school at Boston College, which I thought was a terrible thing. And I have loved nursing. I am proud to be a nurse. I sit on a number of boards now, and I am always a little sad when I hear nurses say things like, oh, I'd never say I was a nurse. I wouldn't get the respect in a CEO position. I feel just the opposite. I feel that I'm more successful in my career because I am a nurse. And anyway, to go back, because I can drift at times, I worked as a primary nurse under Joyce Clifford when primary nursing was invented for several years, and then moved to Connecticut and had an incredible experience, wanted community health work. It was when the National Institutes of Health started to look at bringing hospice care much more embedded in the healthcare system in the United States. And I had the incredible serendipitous experience of being asked if I'd like to do that, and went through a National Cancer Institute training program to become a home care hospice nurse. One of the faculty members was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It was just an unbelievable experience. Moved again to Richmond, Virginia, where I was the clinical specialist for oncology at the Medical College of Virginia. And my boss decided to go back to school to become a nurse lawyer, and asked me if I would be the interim associate director of nursing in this enormous medical center. I didn't know. I knew nothing. Didn't know how to write a memo, didn't know how to do an evaluation. Okay, sure, I will. Well, they did the search. And again, it was like that moment when I went to the nursing home. You just knew that this was what you were supposed to do. And I've worked administratively ever since then. Came to this school when it was once called New Hampshire College, because I didn't have...
Me too.
I didn't have the business background for the jobs that I was holding. We weren't taught in nursing school the tough place where healthcare meets business. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the true piece of paper or the knowledge that went with my job. So had an incredible experience here and stayed to do the advanced certificate in health administration. And ended up with the Partners Healthcare System, the largest healthcare employer in Massachusetts, in an interim role for 6 months. And that was about 18 years ago, where, I have an unusual job as the chief nursing officer, the chief operating officer, the president over 3 of our hospitals. But we're a very matrix organization, so it's a team that gets it done. So my last sentence, a last little paragraph. I am just, I will have my convocation commencement this weekend for my doctorate, which is something I did. It doesn't get me any promotion, it doesn't get me any more money, but I felt that I had a role model that for the Spalding nurses, because I don't believe you should be in healthcare unless you're continually learning. So I did a throwdown challenge for all of the nurses to go back and get their next degree. And if they stayed with us, we'd pay for it. And then I thought, you lazy slug, Maureen, you've got a role model this now. So I went back to an intensive program and just finished it. And made my children very proud of me, which is
Yes,
equally as important.
congratulations. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Yes,
That is
Take it away.
quite a
Yeah.
journey. Thank
Well,
you for sharing that journey.
yes.
I just wanted to say for those in the audience, that's a walk through nursing history right there too. She did a lot of little name dropping of some high power nurses throughout history. So thank you for
I tried
sharing
to
that
talk
with us.
fast. I'm really very old. So there's a long history I had to do.
Beth, would you like to share your experiences with us,
It's
please?
not nearly as fascinating, I must say. But first, I want to thank all the nurses who are here today. So I know you guys do incredible work every single day. And so thank you for all of your hard work. I'm looking at our own Judy in the audience, who's a nurse and here today with us. So thank you to all of you. Very important job. I am not a nurse, but I did come to Southern New Hampshire. But it was New Hampshire College business degree is what I have. So my journey starts somewhat similar in the sense that I applied to one college to study physical therapy, and that one college, which is a Boston-based college, Northeastern, decided to accept 6 students that year for their entire program. I was not one of them. And so I was like, oh, what do I do now? I was a little conceited. I had a pretty good GPA and thinking, yeah, I'm going to get into the college I want to go to. It didn't work out for me. So I decided to work at Prudential Insurance, and where my story is the same as my sister got me the job there, and I started in the mailroom. So now here 30 years later, so I was in the mailroom at an insurance company. I never ever left the industry. So started in the mailroom, and then they said to me, hey, if you want to stay, we really like you, we'll help pay for college. So that's what I did. I started my journey at Northern Essex and then came here, transferred into New Hampshire College and got my degree from here. While I worked up in Prudential Insurance, from being mailroom clerk to when I left there 7 years later, I was a supervisor running a big department. And so moved up pretty quickly, even though some of those years were part-time years while I was getting my degree. So that was a fascinating experience. And then I got laid off when I was pregnant with my first child, which was also a very interesting time of life. But got hired by a great little, what's called HMO, or insurance company here in New Hampshire, Matthew Thornton Health Plan, which has since been acquired by Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've worked there for 7 years and started there as a director. So again, very operationally focused. So I did everything from budgets to training people to configuring systems to back then when you were a supervisor, you would make sure all the bodies were in the chairs, and you were really like a glorified mother back then. It wasn't really a supervisory role. But just made my way up in any type of job that they needed me to do. Really became the person where when there was a big problem, they would say, Beth, go solve it. And that was very fascinating to me. So Matthew Thornton, I ended up in a director position. And this is one of the questions a little later, but it was a very pivotal part of my career where the CEO of the company asked me to come see him. And just to put it in perspective, I was young enough that my knees were knocking. I was so nervous when he asked me to come into his office. And what he really wanted to talk to me about is making a career change. He said, you demonstrated that you're able to do all the operational aspects of this role. You know how to run a claims department, you know how to train people, you know how to do budgets. But let's see if you can do something external to the company. Let's see if you could do either sales, go out and sell business, or go out and negotiate contracts with hospitals and doctors to try to get really good contracts for the company. So I chose the provider side of the house, and I got external to the company and really realized that that was something I really loved to do. And so I went from running a big department, a big claims department, and this was a little bit of an ego hit because I went from running a big department to an individual contributor and went over and started negotiating contracts. And that brought me to my journey at Harvard Pilgrim, which now I've been at Harvard Pilgrim for 20 years. Hard to even say that, but it is true. And it's been a remarkable journey for me there, where the gentleman who's running our New Hampshire office now is Dr. Bill Brewster. He's here in the room. And that was the job I enjoyed for my early career at Harvard Pilgrim. So for a good stint of my journey, I ran our New Hampshire footprint and was able to grow from there to actually run our regional markets. So then ran Maine, so New Hampshire and Maine together. And then we were going to enter Connecticut, and I oversaw our entry into the state of Connecticut. And then we realized that we needed a leader for Massachusetts, so we hired a leader for Massachusetts. So now my job is commercial business. So the 4 states that we do business in, I'm responsible for the leaders of those 4 states, and then also run our sales department and our product department. So that's been my career journey.
Thank you. It sounds like special opportunities have been provided to each of you that led you someplace you didn't expect.
Exactly.
That's great. Could you tell us about a special project which you've accomplished that has given you great joy? Perhaps challenges, but some great joy. Beth, can you think of something?
Yeah, and I actually often use this, and the Harvard Pilgrim team here will, I think, be able to, this will resonate with them. So when we were trying, it's really hard when you're looking at matrix organizations where you have a core operation, a big operation in a single state, and you try to actually create operations in other states. And I was responsible for that, as I said, in my regional markets role, and it just wasn't working. Our regional staff was not really that happy. They felt very disconnected from the company. They didn't really know what was going on corporately. It was a us and them mentality, like they won't let us do this. And we created this entire structure where we call market teams, where it's a lot about creating a grouping of people at different levels within the company, all responsible for very core aspects of the role, to come together and develop the strategic plan for that state so that everything we do in that state is very local and applicable. And that whole structure was really created when I was in that role. And I would say it's one of my prouder moments, because those teams are the ones that develop how we're going to grow our business and stay profitable in our 4 states. So that model, even though matrix, a lot of literature in business school about do matrix organizations work, and a lot of them say no. I would suggest to you that they can work, but it takes a lot of hard work. So that's something.
Great, thank you.
I think I'll stay with the theme that you've done, and very similar with the matrix example. So once when I started working within the partner system, there was one Spalding hospital. We now have 4 facilities. We have 25 outpatient sites. We're doing work internationally, and we've built it in that matrix model. We took areas that didn't have the same name. Spalding Cape Cod was once called the Rehab Hospital of the Cape and Islands. And we brought a group of people together over these just about 20 years. We expect a lot of our employees, and they do even more. And I think it's because we've been successful making the mission really resonate with people. They believe that they are getting up every day and making a real contribution in people's lives who have had devastating, young people who, with what we know today, may spend the rest of their lives as a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And they're contributing to the body of knowledge and the care that makes that person's life different from what they thought it might be, but in some cases maybe even more meaningful, different but still a really, really quality good life. When you feel that you are getting up in the morning and being able to make that kind of difference in someone's life, but the leaders have to make that real for the employees, or else it's just words on a piece of paper. And that's something that I feel very proud of, because we've done it in a matrixed organization, which is tough. People get up every day and they think of their department or their unit or their outpatient site or whatever. So it's not something that just happens because you wrote a mission on a piece of paper.
That's true.
Thank you, very interesting. Could you tell us about some trends you're seeing that are impacting healthcare currently or you're anticipating coming down the road in the future that we should know about?
Both of us could probably talk for about an hour on
I
that.
think we have till 7, Maureen.
Oh, man. Sure.
Top priority.
One of my interests is workforce development, and I think that's an incredible challenge in healthcare. I mean, we could pick many, many topics. But during the networking time, we were talking about the opening of the Wynn Casino in the greater Boston area and what it has done to our recruitment of entry-level staff. You know, do you want to become a nurse's aide and work holidays and every other weekend and, you know, have a very physically demanding job? Or do you want to work in the hospitality world, broad category, and for even more money? It's tough. I think that we're very challenged with our workforce as baby boomers retire, and the workforce is more represented by millennials. And I don't really like to categorize people, but there are threads of truth in every stereotype. And I would say most millennials don't plan to retire from their first employer.
No.
I have a titch of sarcasm in that remark, but we have trouble getting people to stay longer than 2 years.
Absolutely.
And you have a lot to learn in 2 years with the complexity and the acuity of patients. That's a real serious challenge. So is provider burnout. There's a whole emerging body of research around physician, nurse, therapy burnout. So workforce development is a big thing. Well, I'm not going to talk about reimbursement.
Oh, please don't. That ought to make for a very interesting conversation. Good for you. I'll pick one maybe on the opportunity side. That's a huge one. I fully agree. Unemployment's a great, well, I was going to say very low unemployment makes it very difficult. And then I do agree with the millennial comment, and I agree with your, you know, we have a lot of people who are aging out of the workforce, and then we have millennials who are there, but you train them and then they tend to leave. And you're excited for them because they're following their passion and their heart, and they're making a contribution, and a work-life balance is different than my generation. My kids happen to be a bit in this age, so I watch it every day where my son's an engineer, and he actually thinks he could already run the engineering firm. It's incredible to me how they think they come out of college, they're smart, they're capable, and 2 years later they're ready to run the business, but that's a whole different discussion. The one that I will pick is really the consolidation of the healthcare market. So what you see going on here in New England and many other areas of the country is just that systems are becoming bigger. Yep. So you mentioned Partners Healthcare, right? In all of that consolidation that's happening. Why I call it an opportunity is because you also see what jobs might come out of that. You need a lot of people who understand how to help make change at a system level, how to reinvent jobs that have been available for a long time or around for a long time, but they need to change. So all of this consolidation offers some interesting opportunity and challenges. I mean, it comes on both sides of it, but there's a lot of work to be done to make them sophisticated and efficient organizations, and they're not there yet, trust me. Even though they're coming together as a big system, they're all really run very independently underneath that. As they get on their journey, it will consolidate more and they'll become more of a bigger system. But right now, in New England and otherwise, these systems, the provider systems, and the insurance carriers, we're all consolidating into these very large companies. We just have to figure out, what does that mean for us long term? Is that a good or bad thing? But from a perspective of the type of work that people can do, I think there's a lot of exciting things out there. And if you're an expert in change management, I think you're going to be at the top of the heap to be able to get some really cool jobs going forward.
It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I think you both touched upon generations in the workplace, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other on that and navigating the preferences that each generation has. Kind of as a follow-up to your comments, Beth, we have some members in the audience that are interested in coming into healthcare. What advice do you have for them to sharpen skills that might be needed for the next 5 years? Anything you can think of that would be specially pertinent to them to seek as
Yeah.
they enter the realm?
I think one of the things, I mean, change management is something that's on my mind a lot. I would also say project management. I think that project management fits in almost any role that you have. You could be a nurse and be a project manager, meaning you're taking on some big tasks to try to figure out how to improve or change things. So I think change management, I think project management, I think I'll just put in a plug for this because I say this a lot to folks who are newly emerging into the workforce. One of the things that I think I was challenged by first coming in is not making one of my core skill sets understanding P&Ls and financial management. And I would say understanding financial management and how things work, you know, what's driving your revenue, what's driving your expenses and all of that. I would say that's important in any role you take on, is understand how the bigger system works and what your fit is within it. And so for me, I think that financial part is really important to any business. I don't care what it is. So project management, change management, financial.
Well, I obviously would look at it more from the provider side. And I think that we're challenged right now with the amount of care that needs to be given at the same time that you are doing a lot of electronic documentation. And that is a real challenge. The electronic medical record is vitally necessary. We're in the painful stages of being the group or this 5-10 year period of time of the implementers, which is really hard. It's really hard to be able to look at and engage with the patient that you're trying to develop this relationship with and give a sense to that patient that you don't even have anyone else to take care of, that they're the only person that matters. But at the same time, you've got to somehow be typing on this enormous screen.
That's a really good point.
It is an enormous challenge. We need to do this because healthcare for our children, for the next generation, is going to be much better because we'll have someone's entire history electronically documented. Mortality rates will change because people won't die because they're given a drug that they had a bad reaction to the first time. I mean, there are a million examples, but it's a real challenge to providers to be a good provider and work in an electronic world. It worries me a lot.
That's a great point you bring up. I think technology and informatics is something that we're all dealing with. And at SNHU, we do have informatics in our nursing program to try to prepare our
great.
students for the workforce. So speaking of formal education, could you tell us what your formal education at Southern New Hampshire University has meant to you personally and professionally?
I don't think that I could have actually advanced to CEO positions. I don't think that I could be a valued contributor on the boards that I'm on if I had not supplemented. When I went back to Southern New Hampshire, I had bachelor's in nursing, a master's in nursing, whatever certifications. But I was, as I had mentioned earlier, more and more holding responsibility for the business success of big divisions, then actually the whole hospital. And when you accept a position on a board, you have that fiduciary responsibility. You better know what you're reading on those financial reports to make sure that you're being a good steward of that responsibility. Southern New Hampshire gave me that knowledge. It's great to hear about the informatics. I don't know how realistic it is to incorporate a lot of what's truly valuable business, MBA type, health business in an undergraduate program. you've got to concentrate on critical thinking skills and those sort of things. So it really does, I think, have to be a graduate degree. It was very business focused. You could do your projects in healthcare. But then when I also stayed to do the advanced certificate in health administration, that was a really good concentration. I think that it totally advanced the doors that were open to me in my career.
And I would say, so I went when I was young, right? So I took 1 year and worked, and then I went more as a traditional student. And I would say it gave me the absolute foundation to my career. So it was where I learned everything that an undergrad would typically learn in a business environment. And for me, I just remember, because I was already in the workforce because of that whole starting in insurance when I was fresh out of high school, essentially. The things I was learning in the classroom, I was able to bring back and immediately apply and think through. And I found not every student has the opportunity to do that. I get that, but I was, I guess, good or bad. I mean, that was the situation that I was in. And I would say I still think back of it very fondly. I mean, I did some of my classes at night, and I learned as much from the other evening students because they were even more advanced in their career. So they would describe their real life experiences that were going on at work, which were far senior than the job I was playing, that I was doing playing. I don't think I've ever played at a job, but I don't know, that I was doing in my work. But it was a very fruitful experience for me. And I didn't go back to get my master's until I was 45 years old. So my undergrad degree gave me a very good base to get up to very high level upper management positions. And it was just a personal confidence thing for me that to go back for my master's work, matter of fact, said to me, you don't really need to do this, But for me, I felt like I was limited because I would look around at all the senior vice presidents in the company and say, you know what, they all have their degrees. How can I, continue on? And I think learning as an adult at that age was awesome. And it doesn't matter the school I went to. What was really, my job was in Massachusetts, so I was in a Massachusetts school, but it was just really phenomenal to get an MBA at that point in my career. So I would recommend that to anybody who's listening or part of the audience who hasn't gone back. So my experience was very rich as well.
As you look back on your career, was there a particular challenge that you encountered that was very difficult in your work journey or your school journey, and how did you overcome that?
So for me, I was thinking about this one because I think just as a young professional, my biggest issue that I had to overcome or what I had to learn is to listen more than I talk. As you can see, I have the gift of gab. Sometimes it's not a gift, but I think that it's hard when you're young and you're trying to prove yourself and say, here, look at me, look what I can offer. You tend to want to blah, 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 like constantly be talking. And taking that time to pause and listen and really understand how you can contribute in a more meaningful way and make sure what you're contributing is meaningful, I think that was an important part of my professional journey. And then I would say, for those of us who are still the type of person who will stay at the same company for a lot of years, I have seen a lot of people stay at a company for 20 years and really just fizzle out because they haven't taken the time to reinvent themselves. That could be going back to college, as the example of the two of us. It could be making sure you go to conferences so that you learn more and continually educate yourself. It could be community events so that you're learning and you're seeing how you contribute to the broader community. But reinventing yourself during your career, I think, is really important. As long as you're constantly learning, then I think that you'll have a very fruitful journey. So that's really what I've tried to do, being at the same company for so long.
I think those are words of wisdom for everyone to always keep their mouth shut more often and listen more often. I mean, everyone needs to, most everyone can develop better skills. I would say you have to be willing to take a risk and do the right things. I had one of the most difficult experiences in my career when I took a position running a multi-state home health care agency. Was privately owned, and I was brought in to bring it to a point where it was CMS certified and JACO accredited. And shortly after I took the position, I felt like this wasn't a good company. It was owned by a family. And every day that I went in, I just was more and more worried about how this company was being run. And you look back at these things and you're so much smarter looking at your
Oh,
career
yeah, true.
in hindsight.
Uh-huh.
And I was a mother by myself with two small children. This job came with a car, and I wasn't sleeping. I was like, there's something bad here. I would go in, and the people that own the company would turn papers over and say, you know, what do you want? I'd be like, okay, this isn't cool. I resigned that position without another job and had to go out and buy a car, which is a terrible I mean, I would tell people, don't ever go to your next job. I mean, don't resign until you have your next job. I will tell you, about 9 months later, I got a phone call, and it was the woman that was taking care of the kids after school saying, the FBI's here, they want to talk to you. And that agency was shut down for fraud.
Oh, boy.
And they wanted to interview me about what I knew. Now, that's a very I believe, extreme case. I hope no one else has had that experience. But you have to be willing to take big risks. And I always felt like I'm a nurse. No matter what, I can get a job. I will have a paycheck. I will be able to take care of the kids. But I can't minimize what a scary experience that was. But I hold on to it, remembering no matter what, when you're in a leadership position, you have to make tough decisions. You know, tell people they don't have their job. You have to tell people they have to be discharged when they don't want to be discharged, whatever it might be. And you need to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and feel like you did the very best you could based on the information that you knew. And sometimes there's really tough parts of that you do have to make a decision and live with the consequences. You also have to be able to take risks, I think, to move up and be successful.
Yeah, can I just add one comment? I think that's really, really good. You know, for mine, it's been about people that I've needed to work with, either to your point of we needed to no longer have work at the company or downsizing. And those are things that keep you up at night.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, if you're human, you know you're messing with people's lives, right? So it's not an easy thing to take on. But to your point, being able to sleep is about knowing that you're being fair, you're being honest, you're communicating, you're doing everything in your power to help the person. And so I think just knowing, I mean, that comes with the territory as you get more and more into leadership roles, those risks, and some of them it's not even risk, it's just really hard things that you have to do. And you have to know that you're doing them the best way you can do them and being fair to everybody involved. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of ethical decision-making has to occur, as well as listening to your intuition. That's very important. Both of you have very busy jobs, as you've been sharing with us. Academic careers, family careers. How do you keep a work-life balance so you can come into the workplace refreshed and ready to go to face the next challenge?
So that's a total joke. I mean, I don't know why people write about that. It's a joke. I think that if I am a happy workaholic, and that's a good, healthy thing to be. If I'm getting my energy and I feel good about what I'm doing, I have never separated work and home. They've always been blended for me. Maybe because I did have my children, it was just the three of us. I mean, extended family, but the three of us against the world, that everyone that I worked with knew about my children. My children knew that I worked in a hospital. I was going to get called in the middle of the night, or, you know, had to go in on holidays or whatever. I never tried to separate them.
Yeah. I think I've done good and bad. So I think when my kids were small, I think it's important you work for a company that that you can leave when you need to leave. Like I would leave and go watch a soccer game and then sign back on after my kids went to bed. Because it is hard to juggle everything, right? And so if you are in a career that's advancing quickly and you're young and you have young kids and you still have a lot of responsibility, I always say marry well, and I don't mean marry for money. I mean marry for somebody who's going to be supportive with you. Because, I mean, there were many, many times where I was working way too many hours, but my husband was really doing all the school stuff and all the stuff that he was like Mr. Mom at the schools. And so I think marrying well is important, and if you have that resource in your life, it's really helpful. But if you don't, I do think there's a way to balance it out so that you try to get the best of both. I think many of us want to raise our own children. I will tell you, I would never been a good stay-at-home mother, never. And so for me, work was always a really important balancing factor for my personality, but I really wanted to be there for them. So for me, it was things like getting a cleaning lady so that I wasn't cleaning all day Saturday, so that I could spend Saturday with my children. So those important little, that's right,
We have
clap,
ovations in the
exactly.
audience for you.
But you know, it's a hard expense when you're, you know, earlier in your career, but at the same time, if you want to do both, you have to find those little things that help you do both. So.
Thank you. Also, Maureen, you mentioned a little bit about mission earlier. Each of you seems to have a mission to give back to the community or have had some experiences on devoting time or resources to a community activity. Would you share what those might have been or are?
So when I was in New Hampshire, I would say it was when I was at the height of my involvement in a community. New Hampshire's a great community, so I've moved to Massachusetts, much to my dismay. I miss New Hampshire every day. Massachusetts is fantastic. I'm not taking anything
I
from
was wondering
Massachusetts.
if you were going to like say something.
But what I will say to you is New Hampshire is small and very manageable. And if you're in a business leader role in New Hampshire, getting out in the community is a very meaningful way on how you professionally develop as well as develop your company. And so I've done everything from, you know, leading a United Way campaign to I've sat on a million boards, American Heart Association, the Granite United Way, City Year. It's just what I would say to you, I would be remiss if I did not give Harvard Pilgrim credit in this regard. So our company is a nonprofit insurance company. A lot of people don't realize that there are nonprofit insurance companies, but there are. Part of our expectation as a leader at Harvard Pilgrim, it is right in my goals, is to serve in the community. So if you work for a company like that, they taught me how to do this work well, very honestly, because they gave me the time to do it. And then you go out, and I think it's super important you follow your passion. You have to follow something that is important to you, because when your heart starts getting involved is when you make a meaningful difference. If you're just there to check it off to say, I went and did this in the community, you're not doing anybody any good. And it needs to be mutually beneficial. When you're out there and you're feeling great about what you're doing and you're giving but you're receiving as much back, that's the best kind of community involvement you can do. So I would say there's many of opportunities out there. Find something that moves you, get connected to it, and I will guarantee you, you will get as much from it as you give back to it.
I would agree with what you've said. I think some of this, though, sometimes is a value that you learn at your mother's knee. I mean, growing up, we were always told we had to volunteer and we did it as a family, and I did that with my children as they were growing up. I bring it into the workplace now. For those of you who are nurses, we're on the magnet journey, which is a big deal, a lot of activity, a lot to do. But what we've done is we have clinical ladders, and we've woven in that, you know, you move on the clinical ladder in part only if you are giving back in your community. I also think as a nurse, nursing has been an incredible gift to me. And I feel I have an obligation to give back to the profession and to work with people who are interested in nursing. We do a very, very, Spalding Rehab Network does an incredible job taking employees that are in entry-level jobs and trying to bring them into a college setting, whether it starts with English as a second language, becoming a U.S. citizen, going to the community college, becoming a nurse, whatever. And even if we lose that person to the Spalding workforce, we've still done the right thing. Their children have a better chance. They're able to advance in their community. And we talk to everyone about they're responsible to give back and to pay it forward for someone else. I think it's important when you work in a service industry that you make that an expectation.
That's great. Well, we've covered a lot of territory from your academic journeys and your occupational journeys. As we're beginning to wind down, is there anything you'd like to share with the group about your backgrounds or experiences or words of wisdom moving forward in your careers?
I hadn't thought of this, but I do want to say I owe incredible gratitude throughout my career, and I wish that I had had the wisdom at the time. But for people all along my career that saw something in me that I didn't know I had, that, tapped me on the shoulder and said, will you be the acting person? Or we'd like you to go to the National Cancer Institute and do this training program. Mentors, I think, are really, really important. And I appreciate it more at this stage in my career than I think that I realized earlier on. And I don't think that I would have be where I was if other people hadn't been good mentors to me.
That's great. How about you, Beth?
I would say two things. One is very similar. Try absolutely anything. If somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, do you want to go try this out? Even if you're scared to death, go do it. I remember when I was first asked to go testify for the first time in Concord for a legislative hearing, I thought I was going to die. I'm like, I can't do this. And then I ended up loving it. I mean, it's just, you have to force yourself. Nobody's going to force you to do it if you don't force yourself to do it. So stretch yourself. You can be nervous. It's okay. You could even make a mistake. It's okay. It's, as I think Bill says this all the time, we're not saving lives here. It's not like if I make a mistake, even tonight on this, it's not going to be career limiting or nobody's going to die from it, right? So stretch yourself, push yourself. And I would say, if there was one element that I would say is super important as you try to grow as a professional, and it certainly parlays itself into the family life as well, but communication. Communication, because I think if you're open, honest, you have integrity, you're trustworthy, all of those core elements of who you are, you end up moving ahead. I swear, it's really just about caring about other people and listening and really having a good value system. And I think a lot of that is why you get tapped on the shoulder to continue to try new things. So.
Great. Thank you both very much. I think at this point, we're going to hit the pause button for a moment. So we'll have Allie pass the microphone around if anybody has a question for our panel.
So yeah, just raise your hand and we'll pass the microphone. Any questions from the audience?
You know they have the answers.
Like everybody's looking down, they're like,
Any
don't call
at
me.
all? Yes. Awesome.
Hi, my name is Chanel. I'm from Georgia. I'm a travel nurse, and I started online with Southern New Hampshire about a year ago. I'm trying to transition over to administration role in healthcare. My question for you is, I'm currently looking at a company that offers travel administration work. Do you, how many years experience do you think I would need under my belt before I go into the travel role as administrator?
So it's a company that would have you send you in to be like a nurse manager? Will they recruited for a position or?
Administrator.
So more like leading. Like a practice.
For strikes.
Or,
yeah, when
Oh, okay. Okay, to go in for the workforce that goes in when a hospital's going to go on strike?
yes, because sometimes the administrators walk off the job too, so.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, how many years of experience? So you would have to have enough clinical experience first to then go into an administrative role to be able to go in a strike situation. It's hard to answer that, honestly. I would certainly have to say 5.
At least 5. Thank
I
you.
would, yes. That's a tough situation to walk into, too.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
So you both talked about some tough decisions that you maybe had to work through or kept you up at night. I'm just wondering, when you're going through a tough decision, what do you really keep in the back of your head to keep you going every day when you're making a tough call?
It might be a little bit easier on the provider side because you can always ground yourself in what's the right thing for the patient.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very easy mantra to have. Even if you have to do terrible things like report a physician to the Board of Registration in Nursing, when you're going to sleep, do you know that that was the right thing to do for patients? I think that, for me, is a very grounding question. In board meetings, anywhere, are we doing the right thing for patient outcomes? And to be the advocate for patients.
Yeah. And it's not very different than that. I mean, some of the harder decisions that I've had to make have been about employees, and it's the same thing. Like, is it a good decision for the other employees, and is it a good decision for the business? And so if you know the decision you make, it be it about a project and capital spending or about a tough employee determination, is it going to position the company better tomorrow than it is today? And if you feel good about that, and you know you're doing everything in your power to turn around a situation, and you're guiding people, you just have to feel good about the path you've taken, and that helps you sleep better at night. I mean, it's hard because sometimes it's just some of the decisions are super hard, but at the same time, if you know you've done everything in your power and you've done all the necessary steps and you've been very fair about what you're doing, then I think you just have to feel comfort in that. It's not a great answer, but I think that's what it is for me.
I think I'm going to weigh in on that one. I think if what you have to determine is aligned with the mission of your hospital, your organization, your university, and you can line up all the other factors that impact that decision, then I think centering on the mission is very important. And
Yeah.
Maureen alluded to that earlier.
Hi, I'm Bill Brewster from Harvard Pilgrim. I just wondered if the two of you or three of you could explain how you get people to enter into nursing, or physicians like myself or whatever, to understand that while it's not your mission, money and the numbers, the finances and all the rest finances that mission. And how do you balance that and still keep your soul, keep, all of that, and get young people to start thinking about that? Because when I went into being a doc, furthest thing from my mind, I didn't care if they had insurance, whatever, I took care of them. So just wondering how you get people to start thinking that it's okay to think about the money and still not have it be the important thing.
You don't think if we just say, no margin, no mission, it's going to work? I think it's a gradual thing. I will speak to senior graduating nurses and talk about, their obligation to be active in professional organizations, and their obligation to be active in civic type of actions, and you can almost see eyes glaze over, because that's not why they're in nursing school. That's not what they want to be jazzed up about. So I think that it's a gradual part of the socialization where you realize, you know what, we wish we could have another nurse on the evening shift. And there's more talk about, okay, let's figure out how to get another nurse on the evening shift. I don't think it's a fair expectation that people can have that as they come out of school. it's not what's calling to their soul.
Do you have an answer that you would like to offer?
I just think education is part of it. At Southern New Hampshire University in the undergraduate program, we do have a course that's related to healthcare management and finance to at least lay some groundwork about the importance of understanding foundational information. And then during the onboarding process on a clinical site, I think the mentorship and training that you have involved to make sure that that's part of it will be important as well as they transition to practice.
And I'm going to phone a friend, and Judy's going to hate me for this, but Judy is one of our nurse care managers at Harvard Pilgrim, and she's been there for quite a period of time. And she has a tough job, right? Because she's working with patients over the telephone to help them navigate the healthcare system. But sometimes, Judy, I would imagine some of those patients aren't very happy about a benefit determination, for example, like something's going to be denied. So at what point maybe, like how do you work through that if you're trying to keep you're representing Harvard Pilgrim, so you know you can't just override everything, but at the same time, you're listening to this patient and probably feeling terrible about the situation they're in. So any guidance that you can offer to the conversation?
Our job is telephonic, so I have to listen to the person. It's not, oh, I'm here to tell you about the V&A and do your dressing and take your medication. If someone comes to me or on the phone saying, you know, I have a terrible experience with Harvard Pilgrim, they didn't allow me to be admitted and I had heart failure, then I need to listen to that. And then I need to pull some resources that the company might have. Patient liaison, let's look at this. Let's go through what the process went on with and see if we can't solve it and get back at least to the patient and say, here's what we found. We're not naming anyone, we're not blaming anyone, but perhaps it would have worked better if. And so then I can tell them about their dressing and their wounds and their pain and whatever else they need to do. But I think you need to listen first on that phone call what was happening
Yeah.
in their mind most important.
Well, you have a tough job. Happy Nurses Day to
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
thanks.
No, it's hard because you can imagine working from the insurance side of the house. We do, and you know we have to make hard decisions sometimes about, you know, in your heart of heart, you want to pay for everything, right? It's the easiest approach, but at the same time, some things either don't make sense. So some of it doesn't make sense, but then also it's just there are coverage limits, and so sometimes you have to say, sorry, that's not covered, and it's a different twist on the finance question, but it's
real.
It's certainly real,
real.
and it's hard. People think that insurance companies are saying you can't have that procedure. We're not saying you can't have that procedure. We're saying we can't cover that procedure. But in people's mind, they're not sitting there with a bank of money that they could pay for it.
It goes back to communication
It
that
goes
you
back
had
to
mentioned earlier.
communication, yeah.
Communication as a skill that's necessary to really lay it out very clearly.
Yes.
You want my
Chanel
job
again.
now, don't you?
I have one more question for you. I network online with other undergrads that completed their administration degree. They're having a hard time landing jobs. What do you recommend as an entry-level job to build your way up to an administration job? What would you recommend so you could get that lead position?
Truthfully, I don't think that you will be a good administrator until you have clinical expertise. I really do. I don't want to use the term, you know, pay your dues sort of thing, but you really have to be a clinical bedside nurse for a period of time to know that world, to be able to be a good leader for those nurses. I don't think you can be a good leader until you really have walked in those shoes. And, you know, you understand the support that a new grad needs who's never been with a patient while they died or has made their first serious medication error. You almost have to have your first serious medication error to be able to know what your nurse force needs to lead them. I think that it's important to have that experience, and then you move into, leadership roles. And there's a million ways to do that then, whether you do a traditional way of becoming a clinical leader first, and then do more administrative role, whether you go straight for administrative role. But I think the foundation really matters.
Phil for 13 years,
Okay.
and I've been a traveler for now 3 years and did like 4 strikes. And also, I just want to know, what do you recommend that I should do to get that entry-level job?
Well, it may also be you finding that person being at a facility where someone sees that leadership potential in you. I will say, and I could be very wrong about this, but when you're in a traveler's role and you're moving and you're going to different places, it may be hard to build those relationships over a longer period of time for someone to feel, look, this is someone we should invest in. I see real potential. I don't know if that contributes some to making it harder. It might.
Great question.
Great. So we have time for one last question. If anyone has a wrap-up question? Yeah? Okay.
So you had both mentioned, I know Maureen specifically talked about someone tapping you on the shoulder when they recognize something in you. I'm wondering if you could tell us a time when you tapped someone else on the shoulder and what skills they demonstrated to make you do that.
So for me, I think when you're seeing somebody who's super curious about more than their own role, and that they naturally step up in meetings where they're the ones who's always like making recommendations, or they're the ones that go outside of the meeting and take actions to support the direction you're trying to go. So it's just that level of initiative that you see in somebody, and that level of curiosity that makes you say, oh, they're going places. So it's, people try to stay, again, in their comfort zone and in their niche and in their department. I love cross-functional meetings where somebody, let's say from our product area, is challenging somebody from our network development area. I think that's showing and demonstrating that you understand more about the business. So it's usually folks like that that I think that I would tap and say, hey, let's look at continually grooming you, or put them on big projects. That's what I tend to do, is take people who are like that and put them on projects, and then see them flourish in that way.
I agree with what you've said. I love when people say, I have an idea, or what do you think, or could we try? Because it shows that they're thinking about what they get up and do every day, and thinking about a different way that we might improve somehow. I mean, that shows something innate in that person. I think you can always refine and be a better leader, but I personally don't think that you can teach somebody all that is part of being a good leader. Again, you can always improve, but there's some, I believe, innate personality traits. Now, no matter how many leadership books you read, someone who doesn't have some of those innate characteristics, it's my bias, can read 50 books and still isn't going to quite get some of the nuances. We do very sophisticated succession planning. We do, what if there was an immediate event, who would we turn to tomorrow to kind of keep the trains on the track? But we also, every one of us has to have in writing, if we were leaving in 5 years, and they do this starting at a vice president level, even someone who may be staying for the next 20 years, but if you were leaving in 5 years, who are you mentoring today? And I think when we started doing it, some people were uncomfortable with this. It's become ingrained now, and we're very public and open about it. I think it's also brought out in people who have the idea they aspire to a leadership type of role to put themselves forward in a different way.
Thank you, all three of you, so much for this incredible evening. Can we please have a round of applause for our panelists and hosts?
And can I take a moment to wish the 4 million nurses a very happy Nurses Week? And if you know a nurse or can see a nurse, thank a nurse for all their work and all our healthcare providers. And it was a pleasure working with you this evening. Thank you for this
It
opportunity.
was fun, thank you.
Thank you all so much.